and try to turn you into a prey item. 99% of spider bites are completely accidental. It's the human and the spider in the wrong place at the wrong time. The remaining 1% of spider bites are essentially, hey, y'all, watch this, or just gross mishandling. A couple of months ago, 3 kids, I can't remember where it was, I just briefly looked at the article, they were trying to force a black widow to bite them so they can get Spider-Man powers. So that's an example of gross mishandling of a spider. So once again, there's no spider on Earth that's going to try to turn you into a prey item. We're just too big. We're way too far away from their food chain. So, did you have a question, Dick? Oh, okay. You just popped up on the video. Usually, if you have any questions, please just press and hold the space bar and talk, and then release it to listen. It's just like a walkie-talkie. All right. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to the presentation, the slideshow, hopefully. All right, and away we go. All right, so this is going to be a pretty information-dense presentation. Brown recluses have been under research since the 50s, when it was discovered that they are a medically significant spider. They have a venom that's considered medically significant. And like I said, I'll talk about the venom a little later on. And hopefully this talk will kind of alleviate some of the trepidation you have about this spider, because really there's a reason they call it a recluse. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, is anybody having any problem seeing the presentation?
David, I just see the upper left-hand corner of it. It's not, I can't see the whole presentation. I don't know if anybody else is having that issue.
Anybody else have any problems? Because I'm not sure how to diagnose that one, Karen. All right, let me go to the next slide and see what happens. All right, Karen? Hopefully. All right, so the brown recluse is a single representative of the genus Loxosceles. It's pronounced Loxosceles, like the isosceles triangle. I'm sorry, I hit the desk and the camera's shaking. I apologize in advance for that. It has a worldwide distribution with many species, 123 species, representing the entire genus. There are 11 here in the United States that are native. Obviously, this spider appeared many millions of years ago to have a native distribution this wide, probably in the Carboniferous. Like I said, there's 11 native species in North America. 2 introduced, the Mediterranean recluse and the Chilean recluse. And they look very similar. The very minor differences in the saturation of colors. Their common marking is the fiddle. These are also called fiddleback spiders. Recluses are called fiddleback spiders. And all species in North America appear to have the same potentially dangerous venom. They can do the same kind of stuff. There's a pretty broad distribution across the country. The native species are in the Midwest and in the South in general. The introduced species are more in the eastern coastal region, just because, you know, traffic. You know, they were brought in on boats, kind of like the fire ant, right? So this is the distribution of the spider, the Loxosceles. Now the brown recluse is the most familiar because it has the widest range, right? Obviously, this is, you know, anybody who's lived in this area has heard stories about the brown recluse. There's some other species that are have much shallower or smaller distributions. I don't know if anybody has relatives or friends in California, but every so often you'll see a news report about the brown recluses in California. We're being invaded. As of now, as of last week when I was refreshing this lecture, there still hasn't been any brown recluses discovered in California. There are no specimens that have been collected in California. The one species is the deserta, and it kind of does what it says on the label. It's a desert species that has not figured out how to adapt to human dwellings. It's down here in Southern California around Baja, right? But otherwise, there are no brown recluses in California. And until something gets collected, they can't scientifically say that the species has moved, right? Because it's science works on beyond a shadow of a doubt. A preponderance of evidence isn't enough for science. Until they find a brown recluse in California, there's no brown recluses in California. And here's our very own brown recluse. You probably have seen them post-squish, right? I imagine very few of you have seen them actually alive. But here's the point where they call it the fiddleback. This marking here on the cephalothorax, and it looks like a fiddle. I'll show another picture that's a better top down. Now this marking here, this is actually the heart of the spider. It's literally its heart. It's actually not a marking, it's its heart showing through this thin exoskeleton of the abdomen. Because the spider's exoskeletons on their abdomen are very fragile. That's why spiders don't want to get involved with really big creatures, because they break pretty easily. Up here on the front, in their cephalothorax, that's pretty hard. That's kind of like a crab. But back here, it's more or less like a balloon, and they break easy. And that's another reason why spiders aren't going to come and attack something that's really huge like us. Again, we're so far out of their food chain that no spider is going to attack us. Even the largest spider on Earth, the Goliath bird-eating spider, which does pretty much what it says on the label, will not attack us. We're too big for even that one. It's got a 10-inch leg span, and it won't attack humans. It's also very docile. Amazingly enough, that spider is part of the tarantula pet trade. If you got $1,200 lying around, you can have a Goliath tarantula as a pet. Okay, the general characteristics, they're pretty drab. They're a pretty boring brown spider. They don't have a lot of markings. They're described as large and leggy, which doesn't really help many people because, oh my gosh, all spiders are large and leggy. Seriously. It just has there are spiders in Texas that are larger. There are spiders in Texas that are smaller. But when they say leggy, they have really spindly legs. It's almost kind of like not a crab, or daddy long legs. Not that extreme, but their legs in proportion to their body are really kind of long and spindly. The fiddle marking is the dark marking on the cephalothorax, like I said before, and it's found in both genders and every species. There's some difference in the saturation of the color among the species within Loxosceles in general, but they all have that fiddle mark on their cephalothorax. The abdomen is always drab and lacks any kind of markings. If you have any question about if you see a small brown spider and it has any kind of markings on its abdomen, it's not a brown recluse. It's not anything from the Loxosceles genus. And the legs don't have any stripes on them. There are many small brown spiders that have stripes on their legs and they have markings on their abdomens. And from a distance, and I know, a lot of people are really squeamish about spiders. They really only examine a spider at post-squish stage. But if you look closely, you can determine pretty easily if something's a brown recluse or not. And spiders are really easy to remove from your house on an individual level. And I'll talk more about that a little later on on the integrated pest management portion of the show. The Loxosceles genus has 6 eyes. That's a key indicator for the genus. And in general, for spiders, the number of eyes and their placement is a key indicator for what genus they belong to. They build mesh or tangle webs. They don't have orb webs. You know, the fancy, the pretty orb webs you see in your window, and they have the circle and the radius going around them. They don't, these spiders don't build those kind of webs. They look like they're chaotic. I mean, it just looks like a mess. It really does. And I'll show you some pictures of those here in a minute. Oh, and one thing here down, you saw the asterisk here on the bottom. The color of the abdomen on any Loxosceles may be lighter or darker depending on the food source and how often it's fed. But ultimately, the abdomen on any of the Loxosceles species are drab. There's no real markings on them, no coloration. The spider doesn't jump. This isn't a jumping spider. That's another way to determine that it's a brown recluse. There's lots of small brown spiders that can jump. They're jumping spiders. These guys can fall from a greater height, but they can't jump back up. They have to climb back up. So if something is jumping around, several lengths of its body, that is not a brown recluse. That is some kind of jumping spider, all right? And they use the major ampulate or drag silk to jump off of something real high. They kind of bungee off of it, really. That's how they jump off something from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. All right, so I talked about this before. Here's a clearer picture of the spider. You can clearly see the fiddleback, or the fiddle, right? It looks like a fiddle or a cello. And again, if you remember from the older picture or the previous picture, this marking was a little more pronounced because the abdomen wasn't as filled with food. I mean, that's what's going on here. This is a brown recluse that is fed pretty well. And so this marking, or its heart, is a little less distinct, right? But otherwise, the abdomen is really drab. And here we go, the back for the 6-eye configuration. We have the median eyes and 2 sets on either side of it. This, again, is the key to identifying a brown recluse. Even if you see its post-squish, if you can determine the number of eyes on it, there's no other genus of spider with this kind of eye configuration in North America, north of Mexico. So if you do squish a spider and take a close look at it and it doesn't have this configuration, you don't have brown recluses. And when I started the talk, I said that, you know, they don't really come after you because they can't see you. And that's true. They have really poor eyesight. These eyes are very, very small. I mean, the rule of thumb for spiders, if the median eyes are big, they can see you. I mean, they have good visual acuity. Otherwise, they're pretty nearsighted, if not legally blind. The brown recluse can probably distinguish between light and dark and movement, but as far as if one's walking across you, it doesn't know it's on a human. You're just another service it's walking across, which is another reason why I'm saying that, you know, they're not aggressive. They're not aggressively going after humans and trying to bite you. And here it's a little bit clear. The fiddle marking is a little bit clearer on here too. You can see it straight off the top. And this is a mesh or a tangle web. There's many spiders in North America that make tangle webs, including the black widow. A black widow makes a tangle web. It's not necessarily indicative of a spider that has a medically significant venom. It's just an evolutionary thing. There's many spiders that make these tangle webs. And this is an orb web, like I was talking about earlier. So this is the kind of spider web you casually see when you're looking out your window. You know, there's a spider, a yellow garden spider or a spotted orb weaver, these are kind of webs that they make. Another interesting thing about the Loxosceles, they're the only spiders that when they molt, they keep their legs out flat. Every other spider curls in their legs towards their abdomen, towards the underside of their cephalothorax or abdomen, and then pops out of it. These guys keep their legs out straight. This is another indicator that you actually have reclusa in your house. If you start seeing exoskeletons in this configuration, that's a clear indicator that you have some species of Loxosceles in your house. For us, it would be reclusa. There are many brown, as I mentioned this earlier, there are many brown spiders, small brown spiders that are confused with Loxosceles. And really the brown recluse, the greatest threat is to other small brown spiders who get squished because they're mistaken for being a brown recluse. And around here in North Texas, Texoma, the rabid wolf spider is probably the most common mistaken spider for a brown recluse. This is a young one. After the third instar, it's pretty hard to mistake them for a brown recluse. And instar, when I say instar, it's a molt, right? Spiders have incomplete metamorphosis. So when they hatch, they're miniature versions of the adult. Unlike beetles, who have egg and larva, and they grubs, they look nothing like the adults until they pupate. But spiders, they are miniature versions of the adults, and as they grow, they molt, and that molt is called an instar. Once a rabida, another thing, the rabida, the rabid wolf spider, obviously it's not rabid. The reason they call it rabid is because these are one of the wolf spiders that can move like the wind. If you've ever had one of these in your house and you try to catch them, man, they can just scoot. So that's why they call them a rabid wolf spider, because they move really quickly and they're fighters, or fighter planes, or dog fighters. They evade. So this is a full-grown adult rabid wolf spider. A brown recluse never gets that big. So once you see a brown recluse, it's that big, or not a brown recluse, a spider that big in your house, it's not a brown recluse. Capture it in a jar and put it outside, because really what's happening here is this is a male looking for a mate, and he just wandered in your house looking for a good time. So take him out of your house and just kind of chunk him in the grass, and he'll be fine. They're actually very, very beneficial pest manager spiders. All spiders are, but these guys are really good. All right, so there's some good news and bad news about the brown recluse. The good news, they have a relatively low fecundity. They don't lay a lot of eggs, right? As opposed to other spiders that lay hundreds, perhaps even thousands. And they don't lay a lot of eggs over their lifetime. Right, you can see here, I'm 3 or 4 egg sacs over a lifetime for a brown recluse, as opposed to a widow spider, either black or brown, that can produce 14 to 30 egg sacs with 140 to 300 eggs per sac. And the 300 eggs are the brown widows out in California. I don't think we have brown recluses here. We're out of their range. But the black widow has an average about 140 eggs per sac. The bad news is the brown recluses are very long-lived. The data comes from lab studies, and they can survive for about from 3 to 5 years in a lab. But inside your house, that's almost a lab environment, because there aren't nearly as many predators in your house, in your basement or your attic, or wherever the brown recluse is as set up house, as it is in its natural habitat. Because the brown recluse is naturally an outdoor spider. but it has adapted very, very well to living inside human dwellings. And it can live a long time without food. As you can see here, for the Chilean recluse, it's the introduced species, they can go for months, 10 months in this case, in this particular study, and they survive for up to 7 years. So based on the fact that these are all in the same genera or genus, it's safe to assume that the reclusa here could have a similar resistance to starvation. So that's another thing that allows them to infest your house for a long period of time, just because they can live a long time without going to eat. The behaviors of the brown recluse is they emerge, they overwinter and come out around April and May, and then go back into more or less hibernation around October. Those periods may be different if they live inside your house, simply because your house isn't seasonal, right? You have climate control in your house. They may or may not go into seclusion in your house. They may remain active all year round if you keep your house nice and comfortable. They're also almost always nocturnal. They stay hidden during the day and come out at night. And like I said, their typical habitat is outdoors, but they obviously thrive in human dwellings and structures. That's called the cenothotropic, which means they get along with humans. Right outside, they're found in the same kind of places that most spiders or most insects are: under rocks, loose bark, dead trees. They don't like live vegetation. Excuse me. In homes, cracks, crevices. They also like boxes, clutter. They love clutter. Anything that's kind of junky, like you have a bunch of cardboard boxes in your garage, in your shed, up in your attic. That's a brown recluses love that. So do black widows. Black widows love that kind of stuff. They like the dark, kind of cluttered places where they can hide and build that crazy mesh web and just keep out of the way. Closets that you don't use very often, cabinets that have sprung doors, stuff like that. These guys love these dark places. Like I said, brown recluses and black widows in our area. And they don't need a lot of room to do it. They can do it in as little as a half inch chunk of space. They can set up a habitat. A good news thing that I didn't put on the other page is that they have high habitat fidelity. And what that means is once they find a place they like, they will stay there for the rest of their lives if they can. The females, let me clarify that. The females will do that. Males will eventually leave their webs to find a female. That's how all spiders mate. The males leave their web and try to find a female to mate with. That's when you find a brown recluse in your house, 95% of the time, that is a male looking for a mate. Rarely, it's a female that left her web to find somewhere nice to live, all right? So that's another indicator of how if you have an infestation in your house. And again, I'll talk about this when we get into the integrated pest management portion of the show. They don't disperse widely, they walk. Many spiders that build webs, they use a technique called ballooning. Once they're old enough to leave home, what they'll do is that they'll extrude a long length of web and with a little puff on the end. And it's more like paragliding as opposed to ballooning. But they'll lead out that long stretch of silk, and eventually the breeze will catch it and it'll whip those little spiderlings away. It's like in the early spring when you go out and look at your porch and there's like hundreds of little single strands of silk on your on the railings of your porch. that's an indicator that lots of little spiderlings have just ballooned into your yard and are looking for space. So in the case of brown recluse, they just walk away. They don't balloon out. And we're not really sure why they do that. They do. They can also live in close proximity to one another. For whatever reason, they don't kill each other as regularly as other spiders that get too close to one another. There's not a lot of cannibalism in brown recluses until it's mating time, and then there can be cannibalism. I'm sure you've heard about that. Most male spiders are killed at some point during mating, just because that's the way they work. It's a benefit to the spiders because that means there's less competition from an adult as the spiderlings hatch, and it actually helps the female produce a viable clutch of eggs because, well, she just had a decent meal after copulation. All right, so here's where I want to talk about the venom of the brown recluse. It's a medically significant venom, which means it does what it says on the label. This is a venom that can harm a human in some way. In North America, there are only 2 genera of spiders that are considered medically significant: the Loxosceles and the widows. The brown and black widow have neurotoxins in their venom, and the brown recluse has something called a cytotoxin. So technically, the black widows, the widow's species, are the more dangerous because they have a neurotoxin, a systemic toxin. The brown recluse toxin is a localized toxin. It's only going to affect wherever it bit you. The biggest threat from a brown recluse bite is a secondary bacterial infection. And that's what can cause the most harm. And I don't have any pictures of brown recluse wounds, just in case there are people that are squeamish. But you can find them on the web by doing a Google search, brown recluse spider bite. But be careful of where you get the pictures from. Look at the source of the picture before you look at the picture, because anything that has necrotized, a necrotizing wound, could be mistaken for a brown recluse. I'm going to go show you or talk about some of the maladies that are commonly mistaken for a brown recluse bite. All right, loxoscelism is a necrotic wound attributed to the spider, in general a brown recluse spider specifically, right? And these are where the wound eventually degrades and becomes necrotic, and that means it starts to rot. Okay, this is a lot of words. This is a systemic loxoscelism. Has not happened very often. I think there have only been 8 deaths that have been directly attributed to a brown recluse or any Loxosceles. And here are the symptoms that cause it. Very few people have these kind of symptoms. As you can read, it's nausea, vomiting, fever, chills, joint pain. That's kind of the same reaction you get from an envenomated black widow bite as well. Except for maybe vomiting. I don't think black widows cause vomiting. I'm not sure. More severe form, it can cause destruction of red blood cells, hemoglobin. It could be present. You can have blood in your urine, renal failure, blood clots, thrombosis, and death. From what do I have here? From 1995 to 2015, there were only a third of the population that had a definite evidence of loxolism, and with no fatalities. So And again, it's just difficult to say what actually happened because there's a lot of things that could be mistaken for a brown recluse bite. The problem is, without a spider, you can't say for sure if it was a brown recluse bite. Like I said earlier, science works on beyond a shadow of a doubt. Preponderance of evidence is not good enough for science. All right, so not all recluse bites result in loxoscelism. And like I said, very few deaths, and these are disputed, from systemic loxoscelism in the United States from 1957 until 2019. That's when 1957, like I said at the beginning of the lecture, the 50s was when they figured out that the brown recluse was a medically significant spider. All right, so no recluse was found at the injury at the time or later. And here, this is Michael Keck, Dr. Michael Keck. You guys all know him if you've been to Hagerman for any lecture on herpetology. His favorite thing is, his metric is lightning kills by lightning strike versus kills by X. And I love that. I used to go with the lottery winner. You know, how many, what's the chances of winning a lottery versus being killed by whatever? And that's a little too abstract. So I went with the lightning. That's a good one. So anyway, as you can see, over 4,000 people were killed by lightning strikes from 1959 to 2019. And only 8 from 57 to 2019 were distinctly distributed or recognized as a death from brown recluse. Again, many maladies are misdiagnosed as recluse bites. Lyme disease, burns, diabetic ulcers, bacterial infections from any wound. Like I said, the biggest danger from a brown recluse bite from anything is a secondary bacterial infection. Lymphoma can show signs that can be mistaken for a brown recluse bite. Herpes, and if a wound becomes necrotic, it is not necessarily a recluse wound. There's no bacteria in Loxosceles venom, in any Loxosceles venom. It's not something that occurs. It's not a good growth medium for bacteria. But what the stuff does is it breaks down cells, and then again, through poor wound care, you can give secondary bacterial infection, and then you get all the nastiness that's associated with a brown recluse bite. All right, so how does it do it? It's a fairly complex venom. It has 4 components. 2 are common with every spider that has venom. These are the two basic components of the venom are something that causes a histamine response. It's itchy, it's burning. And every spider that has venom does that, has that kind of basic venom. There's only one genus of spiders that is non-toxic, and if you've seen my spider lecture, you'll know what they are, but not every spider is venomous. Anyway, we'll just go back to the venom. Like I said, 2 of the complexes or components produce a histamine response, and these are the most variable, really, because it depends on your own physiological response. I mean, some people are allergic to bee and wasp stings, and so these histamine components might cause a more profound effect than the actual stuff that's really bad for you, right? It's the least potent part of the venom, but it can have the widest range of effects, from mild local discomfort to anaphylaxis. And that's true for any venomous insect, wasps, bees, ants. So if you have to carry around an EpiPen, you should be careful around spiders as well. The last 2 components are necrotizing cytotoxins, and they are as bad as they sound. One destroys cells from the outside in, the other one destroys cells from the inside out. It literally turns the epidermis into kind of a gooey soup. It also has a high affinity for adipose, for fat tissue. More severe effects can appear in regions where there's accumulations of adipose. Now the treatments, it's common sense really, unless you're experiencing the systemic effects of luxoscelism, the joint pain, the vomiting, nausea, etc. You just have to use common sense. A wound that has welts or hives is not a reclusive bite. If there's any raised area on your skin, it's something else. It's a mosquito bite, it's a fire ant bite, it's some other insect venom. Reclusive bites don't swell. They stay flat and then they collapse. And again, unless you're experiencing systemic responses, you probably don't need to go to an emergency room. Yeah, you can go to a walk-in clinic if you want to arrange an appointment with your primary physician. There's no reason to pay the cover charge for an emergency room visit because it doesn't have if you're not having systemic responses, brown recluse venom is not a systemic venom. It's totally localized. Systemic symptoms manifest pretty quickly. So you're going to know if you've gotten a brown recluse bite. Same thing with a black widow. The systemic symptoms will start to manifest within the first day. The recluse bites, the medically significant ones, like I said, they have a central necrosis and they will start to change color. They get kind of a bullseye, red, white, and blue. Red in the center, white on the outside, and blue on the edge. As the venom begins to destroy the cells, begins to necrotize the cells in the area. Otherwise, if you don't have systemic responses, use basic wound care. Don't let the thing get infected, regardless of what it is, regardless of whether it's a brown recluse bite or what. Don't let the wound get infected. Most brown recluse bites will heal on their own without any kind of intervention. You just use common sense and don't let the wound get infected. Did I mention don't let the wound get infected? All right, so now we're going to move on into the integrated pest management of the program. If any of you have any questions about what I've talked about so far, please feel free to speak up and start talking. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving on. Everybody good? All right. It's really hard to tell if you have an infestation in your house. They're reclusive. That's why they're called brown recluses. Like I said, they have the affinity, habitat affinity. Once they find a place they like, they'll stay there. The only indication are the exoskeletons. Like I said, these are the ones with the legs spread out, right? And free roaming spiders. And these are males, typically males searching for a mate. The more recluses you see wandering around your house, the greater chance that you have an infestation. I've been at the same house. I lived here for 10 years now, and I've found only 3 recluses in all that time. So I'm pretty sure I don't have any problem of infestation. You really just have to inspect your house. I mean, that's the bottom line. You got to look for them because they're not going to, like I said, they're not going to come out and present themselves. So the basic integrated pest management pyramid is cultural and agricultural practices, biological controls, mechanical controls, and pesticides. Pesticides are the last thing you want to use in integrated pest management. And the cultural and agricultural practices in this case are inspecting your house and trying to find if there's an infestation. Of course, if there's no real evidence for an infestation, you probably don't need to inspect your house. Again, it's the number of free roaming brown recluses that you find. And like I said, since I've only had 3 in 10 years, that's not really an indicator of infestation. That's really an indicator of casual traffic because I live on 2.5 acres of land and about half of it is wooded. All right, Restrict ingress. Keep them out of your house. That's the easiest way to keep brown recluses away from you. Just make things look better. Make sure doors have good thresholds, caulk frames, install weather stripping, threshold skirts on garage doors. I mean, it's common sense stuff. The same thing you do to keep any bug out of your house, you do to keep brown recluses out of your house. If you can see light coming through something, obviously something can get in. Deny habitat once inside your house. Recluses and black widows as well love piles of stuff that they can hide in, dark places that have just jumbles of stuff that they can hang out in. Cardboard boxes are a favorite habitat. If you don't have it sealed, if you have a cardboard box, it's not sealed, you don't have it taped shut, you just kind of open. Brown recluses love to hide underneath the flaps that are open. Cluttered shelving. I mean, if you've got shelves that have tools on them that you only use once a year, when spring comes and you have to go start getting stuff ready, they're going to hide out in there. Cabinets with sprung doors like the lower cabinets in your kitchen or lower cabinets in your garage or shelf. If the doors don't shut well, they're going to find their way in. Hoards of newspapers and magazines. I got lots of National Geographics. I keep them on a bookshelf, the recent ones. The other ones, I keep them in sealed boxes. They love those places because, like I said earlier, all they need is a ½ inch of habitat space to create a habitat. Another habitat propensities in general is they like roofs, cedar shake roofs. They provide excellent coverage. My house used to have shake siding, and I took that off when shortly after we bought the place. And between the wasps and the brown recluses, it was a complete reserve for those guys. Silverfish issues are associated with recluse infestations. And again, they typically have wood shake roofs. You need to have good backing. A solid backing for your roof provides a less suitable habitat for recluse populations. And the age of the house and the architecture of the house doesn't really make a difference. My house was built in 1955. It's a split level. It's got a crawl space. It's got 2 separate attics. But again, I've only seen 3 brown recluses in the 10 years I've lived here. But, there's newer homes that have severe infestations. I mean, there's not, and then there's homes older than mine that have severe infestations. It's wherever they can find the habitat. Like you see here, in older homes, they can be distributed evenly because, like I said, I've got 2 attics, I've got a crawl space. In newer homes, they're more compartmentalized. They have the spaces in the walls. They don't necessarily have a crawl space anymore. They may have an attic, but they don't necessarily have a crawl space. Pier and beam foundations, like I said, these large spaces that can accommodate these spiders are great places to live. And there's not really how many spiders can live in one area or brown recluses. It really just depends. Because an attic can hold or can accommodate far more brown recluses than a cabinet. So I can't tell you how many spiders typically inhabit a given area. I just don't know. I wouldn't even know how to begin to measure it. Crawl spaces, like I said, unfinished attics. Mobile homes are kind of vulnerable just because, again, they have their entire structure is a crawl space, and they're not necessarily well sealed against the environment. All right, so as far as biological controls go for it, there are no wild predators that you can put in your house. Really, it's kind of pointless unless you wanted to become a free-range lizard rancher and start raising lizards in your house. Those are the most common outdoor predators for the brown recluse. Small reptiles, geckos, lizards. There are some recluse mimics that will predate the recluses, and they're parasitic wasps. And again, those three things you don't really want to introduce inside your house. The best way to control brown recluses, in fact, any insect in your house, the greenest way, I should say, are cats, your basic Felis domesticus. I've got 4, and they take care of everything. You know how they work. A cat will kill anything that is smaller than it and is moving. If it is alive and smaller than me, I must kill it. So that's why they're excellent pest control. The cats are nocturnal, and like I said, they kill anything that moves that is smaller than them. Now, as far as physical and manual controls, you can just simply remove free roaming individuals. Spiders really aren't pests, I promise. Just take a square cup, a square container, and kind of just you can use a watercolor paintbrush and just kind of push them into the glass. They're going to run. Just tap the hind legs, and they'll run into the glass or whatever the container is, if they aren't playing dead. Every brown recluse, the 3 brown recluses I removed from my house, they immediately played dead when I try to get them into a cup. So then you just kind of sweep them into it and take them outside. If you're trying to remove brown recluse infestations, wear protective clothing, obviously. Tape your legs, pant legs, wear boots, long sleeves, tape the sleeves, shirt cuffs. And this is interesting. In some of there have been homes that were very heavily infested, thousands and thousands of them up in Missouri. And exterminators have worn beekeeper suits to take care of the infestation. For us, the easiest way to remove an infestation, if you find one, is just use a shot vac, a 6-gallon shot vac at the least. I say 6 gallons because those engines are powerful, or the motors are powerful enough. Anything smaller is probably not powerful enough to suck the spider in and kill it, because what happens is as the spider tumbles down that corrugated tube, it literally gets beaten to death. A minimum 6 gallon, and beats the spider to death. Because spiders, as I said at the beginning, are pretty fragile. They break pretty easily. Their abdomens are particularly vulnerable. Hang on, I gotta take a drink of water. I can't talk anymore. My tongue's sticking to the roof of my mouth. That's better. Sticky traps. These are essentially non-toxic, but they're blind. They'll kill anything that walks across it. They're not terribly humane, particularly humane. They're effective against free-roaming males and spiderlings. The females, not so much, because like I said, that habitat fidelity, once a female finds a place she likes, she'll stay there as long as she can. There would have to be a pretty major event to make her try to find a new dwelling. I just said that. And obviously they gotta be kept out of reach of animals and small children. I can only imagine the chaos that would ensue if a cat found its way into a sticky trap. The sticky trap is a war of attrition. Eventually there won't be enough males to have a breeding population, but that could take a considerable amount of time, simply because, like I said, even though there's a low fecundity, not a lot of eggs get laid, the survival rate of those eggs are really high inside of a house, just because of the environment. The environment is conducive to not being killed by a predator, and since the brown recluses don't go after each other, you just got to take your time. And as I said before, it's not very humane or selective. They don't care what they catch. Here's an example of a sticky trap full of brown recluses and other stuff. You got a beetle over here, you got a doodle bug there, and another doodle bug over here, doodle bug. Another beetle, another beetle, another beetle, but brown recluse, brown recluse, brown recluse, brown recluse, brown recluse. And you can see by their abdomens what happens is they starve to death. There's not a pesticide on this. They just get stuck and they die from starvation. And like I said, you can see it just because their abdomens have shrunk to nothing. It's not terribly humane, but that's me. I don't like to induce unnecessary suffering. All right, some chemical pesticides. All right, it's kind of weird for a master naturalist to promote pesticides, but pesticides aren't the devil if you use them strategically. Don't spray first and ask questions later. And follow the directions on the label, please, please. Part of the major part of getting a pesticide approved by the FDA is having proper instructions, the accurate instructions, accurate concentrations. More isn't better, especially for concentrates. The same amount, if it's 2 ounces per gallon in a concentrate, 4 ounces per gallon isn't going to make it any better. It's going to kill the same amount of critters, but there's going to be more of it concentrated on your property. More isn't better. You can use micro pesticides and dusts in these months, May, June, July, with follow quarterly visits. Liquid sprays are more effective on the spiderlings. Pyrethrins are very good for taking care of brown recluses. You can scrape out any egg sacs. And oh, I forgot about this. Egg sacs can be identified with a black light or a UV light in dark places. They'll glow. These are the pesticides that are recommended for controlling brown recluses. Cymexa, it's an insecticide dust. It's an aerogel, silica aerogel. This is a concentrated liquid with deltamerthrin. And Tempo SC, concentrated liquid. It's also available in dust form. And again, pyrethrins with premixed concentrates. Here's the name brands of them: Intrepid 2F, Bonide, Bifin IT, anything with a pyrethrin in them. There's really no fumigation for this. I'm not really a big fan of fumigations in general because it's really a shotgun approach, and what you have to do to prepare for a fumigation control is really just nuts. You have to do a lot, like move furniture, wrap things up, make sure nothing that no utensils, cutlery are exposed to it, etc. It's just more trouble than it's worth. There are natural repellents and insecticides available, but there's not much, if any, research that demonstrably shows that this does anything, but you're welcome to try them. Citrus oils, mint oil mixed with water and some dish soap as a surfactant, insecticidal soaps and horticultural sprays. If you're a master gardener, you're probably familiar with those. Say the brands, Safer Brand, Garden Safe, Miracle Grow, Nature's Care. You can find those guys make insecticidal soaps and sprays. As far as the oils, Monterey, I use Monterey products a lot, Southern AG. And then there's a product called neem oil. Neem oil is an extract of an African evergreen tree, and it has a ingredient called azadirachtin. That is a natural pesticide. If you do get neem oil, you have to make sure that azadirachtin is an actual ingredient on the label. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything for your bugs. Another final thing is diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is kind of a go-to for all hippies to try to keep bugs out of the house, simply because for an insect, it's kind of like, it would be like us trying to walk across a field of broken light bulbs. The glass just, it tears their feet apart. It takes the protective coatings off of their exoskeletons. They dehydrate or literally bleed to death. I mean, it kills them. Like I said, there's no real research for any of this other stuff that says that these will take care of a brown recluse infestation or keep them out of your house. All right, so that's about all I have. And if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to ask. And we're just going to throw some stuff out here. I help volunteer out at the AgriLife Center in Sherman. If you have any questions about any bug, please feel free to email me at sherman.agribugs@gmail.com. If you send me a picture, a good clear picture, preferably from the top down, I'll help you identify a bug. Make sure it's nice and clear and as well as you can, especially if it's a beetle. There are 13,000 species of beetle in North America, and I can barely remember my own name and where I live, much less keep track of all those beetles. Or if you want to bring a specimen in a sealed container to the extension office at the courthouse here in Sherman, please feel free to do that. All right. Okay, and that's the all.
Great job, David. I think that I learned more than I ever probably needed to know about brown recluses, but it's very interesting to me. I appreciate you taking time to do this.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said.
Anybody have questions?
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of information about this bug or this spider. It's been investigated, like I said, since the 1950s. So and this is a distillation of all the stuff that's out there. So yeah, it's pretty overwhelming.
Hey, David?
Yeah.
You did mention one method of control is just squishing.
I did mention squishing. I thought I did. Yeah, you can squish them. But the problem with squishing is that you can misidentify a small brown spider for a brown recluse.
If you're going to poison, it's probably better to squish than poison everything.
Yeah, that's a personal choice. I mean, I make the insecticides available if somebody wants to use them. If you use them strategically, it's a good thing. But if you just spray like mad, yeah, it's not that great. It's not a good thing. But anyway.
What's more common are brown recluses than black widows around here?
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear you.
How much more common are brown recluses than black widows around in our area?
I don't know, Dave. I mean, I've never seen any data that says one outnumbers the other or they're equal. I mean, I haven't seen brown recluses here in like I said, I've only seen 3. But up at Grayson College, Patrice has seen brown recluse carcasses on a regular basis. And I've removed brown recluses that were too close to my house. Black widows that were too close to my house. So I don't know. I don't know who has a greater propensity, black widows or brown recluses. I'd lean towards brown recluses simply because of their ability to survive. Black widows, 120 eggs, maybe 5 will live to adulthood.
Not much of either kind around my place here.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, you got to look for them too. They're both nocturnal. They both don't hang out in the open. It's not like a yellow garden spider or a spotted orb weaver. They keep to themselves. So, I mean.
So, David Turner, did you check your outhouse? Typically, they hide under the lid on the outhouse.
I live in Denison, not Hendricks or anywhere else in Oklahoma.
Got a smile out of Bert, though.
That wasn't a smile.
I smirked then.
It's probably just a little indigestion.
Parsons, this bird. Yeah, thank you very much. I learned quite a bit.
You're welcome.
For master naturalists that want to enter this in BMS, this would be AT Hagerman sponsored, and for a second Saturday. So no travel time since you're sitting at house anyway, and there's nothing.
No travel time. I got out of bed for this.
Sorry, you don't get travel time. Well, actually, you could get travel time from the bedroom to there, because for you, it's not AT, it's service.
All right. 30 seconds.
Well, and David Turner, I can send you a list of all the participants if that helps you from a VMS standpoint.
Well, there's not enough to worry about. I've seen who all was on here, so I'll know if somebody tries to cheat.
Okay. All right. If nobody else has any questions, I'll go ahead and shut down the meeting, and hopefully we'll have a program in August. I think Susan Knowles was still checking with the speaker that was scheduled for August to see if they were going to be able to participate via Zoom. Hopefully they do. And for those of you that are photographers that are interested in hearing Randall Patterson talk about catching birds in flight, we've got a meeting with a program coming up this next Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, where it'll be too hot to be out taking pictures anyway. So join us for our photo club meeting if you're interested.
Is that actually going to be out at the refuge?
No, it's going to be a Zoom meeting just like this one.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in person one day.
Thanks again, Parson.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Yeah.